Welcome to Meet the Creators, a podcast dedicated to the art of business and the business of art. Tune in to better understand the value of creative minds in marketing and business as we build the bridge between business and creative artists.
Okay, here we are. Meet the Creators, Flipbird Films. I'm here with Evan, founder of Adapt.
Thanks for having me.
Evan, can you give a little description of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I founded Adapt. It's a clothing company here in the Bay Area. We've been operating for almost 20 years now. Started in UC Davis, where I went to school. That moved to SF, then to Oakland, then back to SF, and that's kind of where I'm at now. But it's been it's been a long journey, lots of ups and downs, a lot of fun, which is the most important part, I think, and something that I've been able to make a life out of. So it's been good.
You know, that's awesome. What inspired you to create Adapt? Where'd the idea come from?
Yeah, so I've always been a creative person. You know, grew up drawing monsters and jet planes and like baseball players and stuff like that. So, you know, I've always kind of had that creative part to me. I've always been into clothing from as early as I can remember, you know, putting on outfits and like colors and looking for different brands once I was old enough to realize like the different brands that were out there. So it's been a kind of natural evolution from kind of since I was a little kid. And so it was in high school that I really decided, you know what, I'm going to try this clothing thing out. So came up with the name Adapt. And even after that, it was like, oh, well, I could do my own thing, or I could try to work for a company like Nike or Adidas or something. So, but then I ended up, doing my own thing, and it just kind of went from there. You know, I had a full-time job, and I just sort of moonlighted and did Adapt at the same time. And eventually I was able to go off on my own and do it for real. Congratulations.
That's a huge accomplishment. So when you say you're a creative, what are your areas of specialty?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely love most things creative. I love art, I love music, photography, of course, design, graphic design, fashion design, architecture, interior design. So really most things visual, I would say, as well as, literary. I love to write. I like reading. So I think, there's so many facets to creativity, and I think I'm interested in most of them. And there's probably some that I haven't discovered yet, but I try to integrate those kind of things into the stuff that I do, whether it be, through popular culture, music that I like, stuff like that. So all the creative stuff kind of comes together and is integrated in some way into the clothing. Yeah.
How would you say you're drawing inspirations from other areas that you like into your designs and into the clothing?
Yeah, so Adapt really is an extension of myself. I'm the only person that runs the brand in terms of like ownership and making the big decisions. So I'm able to do whatever I want in terms of the creativity. So most of the stuff that we do is either taken from my childhood, or I'll see someone, some cool phrase that somebody says, or some song that inspires me. There's a lot of nostalgia-based stuff, whether it be TV shows, movie, comic books, artwork, other designers, stuff like that. So it's a lot of just stuff that whatever's in my head, I just have my iPhone notes, pop it out, write down some idea that pops in my head, and then it probably will find its way into a shirt design or two.
That's dope. So you're just like super observant of everything around you, and it's like just planting seeds of inspiration whenever you get to the design table.
People who are creative, like in general, it's like you draw inspiration from things that you see or things that you think about or just ideas that you have. And there's so many different sort of artistic components that I think make up the person that I am, whether that be reading Calvin and Hobbes as a kid, or, a Spawn comic, or, watching the Transformers movie or whatever. So it's like these different types of inputs when I'm, I would say between the ages of like 5 and 20, like that period, I would say is like the meat and potatoes of what I think a lot of the designs are actually coming from. Because it's just the stuff that, cements itself in your brain, certain like visual cues, the colors that I like, or just sort of, the way that I like to draw, a cape on a superhero or something. So it's a lot of that earlier stuff that really informs a lot of the creative part. And then I will somehow interpret that into a current graphic, or there'll be like flipping a logo for something, or just kind of playing off of a character or something. So a lot of it is, it's just different manifestations of these earlier kind of inspirations from when I was pretty much a kid. So
that's awesome. Just taking inspirations and things you're drawn to as a kid and being able to apply that to what you're doing now as an adult. That's also a dream. I was on your website and I was kind of looking at your mission statement, concept, design, and execution. Can you talk to me about why you chose those words?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my design process is literally that. So concept, so it's having the idea. A lot of the graphics that we do they're sort of visually and graphically simple. So, it might be one or two colors. It's usually like a text-based thing a lot of the time. So a lot of what we do, I think, is not really based on like the technical ability of the graphic. It's really, for me, it's more of a concept. So it's, what is the idea behind the graphic? What's the meaning? I try to put second and even like third meanings within one simple graphic. It's like, okay, well, if you know what this reference is, then you're going to get these different meanings. But on the surface, it's very simple. So I try to pack as much into the meaning as I can. And that's kind of what it ends up becoming.
Right. So you come up with a concept, you go through the design.
So the second part is design. So that's actually creating the graphic. So whatever the concept is, okay, how can I put this into a physical form on paper or in Illustrator, Photoshop? And then the execution is, well, what is the medium that it's going to go on? So is this going to be like a shirt graphic, or it's like a small chest print and then like a big back graphic, or am I going to put this on a hoodie or something? So the execution is just kind of how that manifests into a product. But I think really the key ones is really the concept. I think is the most important, and then the design of it. So
that's awesome. Another thing I noticed on your website, underneath that paragraph, was the idea of bettering yourself and bettering the communities around you. Why did that go into your mission statement?
Yeah, so I think that dovetails into like Adapt Plus, which is this part of the brand where we do charitable work. So it's like 100% of the profits of these certain projects go into, whether it be like aid from some type of disaster, it could be cancer research, it could be, women's rights, stuff like that. So there's all these different kind of sub projects that we do to give back to the community. And so I think that's where that part of the statement comes from.
Why was that important to you to add to your brand? The whole idea of giving back?
Like I would love to say, hey, out of the gate, I wanted to just give back and just do all this stuff for the community. And really it just kind of happened naturally. So the first one that we did was the tsunami in Japan back in 2011. And it was just this huge thing. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. Many people died and stuff. So we just responded right away. We did this shirt that kind of said JP on it, which is the country code for Japan. And we said, hey, we're going to donate all the proceeds to the American Cancer, the Red Cross. And, it kind of went crazy. Like we put it out and a lot of people kind of got behind it because of the mission. And just seeing the amount of response to it, it really encouraged me to be like, hey, this should be an integral part of the brand. I mean, what's better than giving back? We shouldn't be all about just trying to make money and suck out of the community. It's like you have to put into the community and you have to support the different sort of areas that you believe in. So I think it just kind of happened. And then from there, we started doing other projects, and now it's just kind of a thing that we do.
So it's super inspiring for people to try and help other people, but they also get something fresh in return. That's a win-win situation.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's, I think, why it works so well. It's something where you can feel 100% good about what you're doing, and then you can 100% be giving to a cause that you believe in too. So it kind of, everybody wins. And it's sort of a no-brainer. It's like, that's totally something that we should be doing. And so that's kind of the only way we've done it ever since it started. And it's just a great system, I think. And people, to the point of just people liking it, I think it's, we all kind of have that in ourselves that we want to support, but a lot of people, it's like, how do I, this thing happened in some other country, like, what am I supposed to do about it?
Yeah.
But if you're provided with this vehicle that can do that, and then, hey, by the way, you get this cool shirt, it's just easy peasy, so it's something that I think it's very easy for people to get behind.
That's awesome and genius, and it warms my heart just knowing that there's people out there that find ways to give vehicles for people to give back. So that's awesome.
Right on.
Something I've always been drawn to with your brand is your name. The name of it, Adapt. I've always been drawn to that. What's the story behind the name of the company?
Yeah, so the original name, I wish I had a visual here, but I was playing with these triangle shapes, kind of like the play button on a receiver, like it kind of looks like a D sort of shape. So like a capital A, D, A, P, T, they're kind of all in that triangle shape. And so basically using this triangle and a line, we created the first logo, which was the only word I could spell using these triangle shapes. And then, so it just kind of was this random reason that it was called Adapt. But as it grew and as the years progressed, it became so integral to what the brand actually is, because, we adapt different logos, we adapt different kind of ideas and turn them into something new. We have to adapt to the changing clothing landscapes. I mean, you look at, when COVID hit, everybody's adapting, every type of business. So it's just a term that applies to so many different things that it really became just this universal sort of thing, bigger than even the concepts of the brand. And it ended up working really well. But that whole original meaning was just super random. It was the only thing that we could spell. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Speaking of adapting, you've been in the business for 20 years, your brand. How have you seen the landscape change when it comes to building your product, marketing your product, and getting it to consumers?
Yeah, it's been 20 years is a big span. And given that the technological landscape, this is a very important time in just technology changing. When I was a kid, there wasn't really internet. I mean, so just that, that's all you need to know, really.
Yeah.
So, but when we first started promoting, I sort of always knew that the brand would be an online brand. People were just starting to, put clothing companies on websites. And I was, I had this little link, hey, you can pay me by PayPal. This is my PayPal address. And there was really no official way to accept payment at that time. So, that's kind of how we started, promoted through MySpace, which no longer exists. The real sort of big break in kind of the online promotion, organic kind of stuff was when Instagram came out. So I was actually at Apple working for iTunes at the time. And so, we'd see all the new apps when they would come out. The App Store had just been invented. The iPhone had just come out. And so, I had a coworker, he's like, hey, you should check out this thing called Instagram. It's all these photographers are posting stuff. It's really cool. I'm sure you guys all know about it because you're in that industry, but but it quickly became a very good tool for not just photographers, but for business owners, creatives, anyone who's trying to push a product out there or kind of get their message out there. So we really got a lot of traction early on from Instagram. So that was big for us in terms of getting products out there. We sold on this site called Karmaloop, which was this big online retailer, kind of like the Amazon of streetwear back in the day.
I've bought from there.
Yeah, exactly. So and then, different things like that. So those were kind of the ways that we got out there. And then as our own website grew, we would bring people back to our website. And then of course, things like, Facebook and Twitter. And now of course there's all these other different, ways to promote. And so that's been the evolution of our kind of how we've gotten our product out there to the masses.
Just taking advantage of what's out there and finding an angle and using it, right?
Exactly. And before, there's of course paid ads and sponsored posts and all this stuff now, but back then everything was free. You could just post, and it was a very organic kind of, if your stuff was cool, people would check it out. So it's a different environment now. I still tend to, because we have our customer base, I don't do really any advertising and stuff like that. We kind of just market directly to our consumers, and hopefully it reaches, new people. But I'm not the type of brand that's just going to be, flooding sponsored posts and stuff like that.
Gotcha. I'm really curious, for you as a designer and a builder of a brand, how would you define a brand, and what do you think its importance is when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, a brand is hugely important. It's something that it is the representation of whatever it is that you're selling. So, brands that look at a brand like, Supreme, or something that's very known and established for its name. And, you can slap that on a jacket. The jacket doesn't necessarily have to be particularly well embellished or whatever. Oftentimes it is, but just that brand power is really what's pushing the consumer to buy that product. So it's extremely important to create brand loyalty, to stand for something, to have a brand that people associate with, what is their purpose? What's their meaning? Like what can I expect in terms of quality when I purchase a product from them? So it's it's really the most important thing, because really all we have is our brand, because especially in this day and age where it's just like anybody could screen print shirts and anybody could throw stuff up on any type of social platform. So it's really all about the brand, I think. And, it takes time to build up what is the meaning, what's the purpose of that.
So it sounds like a brand is an idea, a representation of a way of life that people can relate to. It's an experience. It's all of the above. It's not just a product, but you're selling a philosophy and all of that. Did you have that in mind when you created Adapt?
So for me, I think my experience is a little different, only because Adapt is such a particular brand to my own sensibilities. Whereas, a lot of people, they might, hey, 3 partners come together. Hey, let's start this brand. The theme is going to be, we're going to do this kind of cartoon-based thing or something. We're going to use these certain colors. It's going to kind of represent this thing. Whereas for me, it's literally like my sensibilities personally. And so I'm very tied in with what the meaning of the brand is, like what is its purpose. And I think that, so I don't know how, what the meaning is necessarily for other people who are doing other brands. But I think that if you are close to it, and if it's not just something, hey, I'm going to get this thing popular and I'm going to sell it to some larger brand or something, if you're really about it, then I would think, you would be very interested in like, what is the specific message that I'm trying to put out there?
What kind of advice can you give other people who are building a brand? What are the kinds of questions they should be asking themselves?
I think, back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, I think you should have a purpose to the brand. What is it that you're doing? What is the message that you're trying to get across? What are the consistent themes that you're trying to get through with the garments or whatever product it is that you're selling? And, I totally understand too that out of the gate, you may not know. You may know that, hey, I want to start this brand, but I don't necessarily know what the message is. But I think that over time it will become apparent. You're going to realize these are the things that I'm interested in. This is what I'm passionate about doing. And so it will just kind of manifest on its own, I think. But I think that's super important. I think that's the most important thing, is having a sort of clear idea of what is it that you're trying to do. And again, with the literally tens of thousands of brands that are out there, you have to have a differentiator, or else why does anybody care about what you're doing? So I think that's the most important thing in terms of starting a brand. I think also, keeping your expectations realistic in terms of products. I know that when I first put out, our first graphics, it's like, hey, like everybody's going to buy these and be so cool. And it's, of course, your friends and family, they all come out and they support you and stuff like that, which is great, but it's not indicative of the greater market, I don't think. And so you have to be realistic about, okay, well, if nobody's ever heard of me, if I'm just coming out of the gate, like I have to have good stuff, or else, they have no reason to support me otherwise. So I think you want to be realistic with, be sort of realistic about the print runs you do, and kind of like how much you think you're going to sell of something, because I'm assuming as a small business owner, your funds are going to be limited. So I think that being conscious of those things is really important.
So it's like you just got to start and know that you're not going to know everything right away. It's going to evolve and adapt
That's right.
and take on a life of its own at the same time. But you're also saying keep your expectations to a certain level because you got to be ready for the ups and downs. And the one thing that's going to hold you to it is if you believe in it yourself.
Absolutely.
So you just got to know where you're coming from. You've been doing this for 20 years. Did you have a marketing strategy? Did you collaborate with other people to kind of get your brand essence across? How did you get that? How did you get that message across? And was there any marketing strategy towards it?
Yeah. So brand strategy wise, really no. I mean, I felt confident in my design abilities. I felt confident in the concepts that I was putting out there. And so my thought was, hey, you know, I see what else is out there. I think that I can compete. I'm just going to put stuff in the marketplace and see what happens. And it's just really just been from there on. In terms of collaborations, absolutely. So we've literally collaborated with probably hundreds of brands, whether they be in the Bay Area, they could be, you know, in some other country or something, but it's, you know, food brands, clothing brands, design brands, just really anything that inspires us, or, you know, if people want to collaborate with us, then we check them out, you know, and if I like what they're doing, then we'll absolutely work together. But I very firmly believe in collaboration. I think it's an awesome way to have a different perspective on your products. I know for me, because I do produce probably 98% of the designs myself, it's good to step away sometimes and like, hey, I should probably get someone else's perspective, or, you know, this guy's a way better artist than I am, so I'm gonna have him knock something out and see what he could do. So it's kind of like, it's great to get that other input, get the other perspectives, and sort of come from a different place. And then even from a marketing standpoint, you're then kind of leveraging, well, they have a customer base, you have a customer base, both brands can benefit from that and reach a wider audience. So I think that collaboration is just really fun. You know, it's a great way to connect with different creatives and different things like that. So that's always been an integral part of the brand, probably from a couple years in. Yeah.
Speaking of collaborations, you know, I have my own favorites, but I'm wondering, what are your favorite collaborations that you've done with other artists and companies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there's so many. The most recent one that I really liked was the designer of True, which is a, you know, OG streetwear store based in San Francisco. They have East Bay locations as well. And their designer Josh did a script of our gold-blooded graphic, which is one of our most popular graphics that we do. We recently had a 10-year anniversary for it. So we had all these different artists and brands kind of do their spin on gold-blooded. So you know, I loved his script graphic. That's probably the one most recently that comes to mind. We've had some great ones with Kukui in San Jose, Illist here in I guess San Francisco and the Peninsula as well. Early collabs with E40, Hieroglyphics. There have been some Colin Kaepernick when he was with the Niners. So there's just a countless good collaborations that we've done. Those kind of come to mind right now, but yeah, there's been some really great ones over the years.
How did those collaborations happen? Was it networking? Was it just reaching out? Did they reach out to you? Combination of all of it?
Combination of all of it, yeah. I think if I see a brand or some artist or something that I like, I'll reach out. You know, other brands could reach out to me. There could be like a food truck that wants to do, you know, some projects. So it's just super organic. It's whatever ends up happening. You know, it can really happen anyway. But you know, the organic nature of it is great, and it's a great way to kind of just work with other really inspired individuals.
How important for your business would you say is it to network or reach out to other people in terms of either just giving them a nod, giving them props, or looking to work together, even just keeping a pulse on what's out there?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I would say the first few years of Adapt, I did zero collaboration. I was like, this is my thing. I don't want anybody to kind of like taint my vision of what I'm trying to do. I didn't really ask for anyone's help. I was just doing my own thing and just putting product out there. And as I kind of grew and started to work with, you know, photographers and models and different brands, I kind of had this thought of like, why was I not doing this since the beginning? There's so many super talented people that are a lot better at different aspects of whatever the business may be I can learn from and utilize and just kind of grow with these people. And I was really just holding myself back by only doing it. It just made it a lot harder for me. So I think that collaboration and that kind of working with other entities is super important for the growth of any brand, and it's something that I definitely learned organically along the way. There was kind of this group of Bay Area brands that I worked with kind of on a regular basis, and we're all still really good friends. But that was a huge, part in, hey, what's a better shipping strategy, or, what's the best way to put our products in front of consumers? Like, what are the little, marketing tricks and stuff? So it's all this stuff that, and you can Google it, and you can go on forums and do whatever and go on, social media and find different ideas. But doing that in person and working with people that is a really great way to go about it too.
It's like a support system. At the same time, you're also building a community and you're not going through it alone. You might be separate companies, but there's other people also kind of struggling with the same kind of stuff. And
absolutely.
Just reaching out, you're able to get help like that. So doing this for as long as you have, what are some of your proudest moments for Adapt?
Proudest moments? Well, certainly within this past year, we did a collaboration with the Golden State Warriors. That was huge. We partnered on the gold-blooded theme. So that was the theme for the postseason for the Warriors 21-22 season, which they ended up winning, by the way, which was amazing. But I think really it was just that whole kind of having it recognized on this larger stage, having it being out there for a lot of different people to appreciate. And of course, they did a lot of the design work. We did a lot of the design work. So it was truly a collaborative endeavor. And that was a really great, that was absolutely the thing I'm most proud of in more recent memory, I would say. I think, having the stores that we've had throughout the Bay Area was big. Being able to employ dozens of people, supporting people's lives, which was, to me, I think is pretty cool. Like, to actually be able to employ and kind of push people along in their own journeys, whether it be creative or just getting their feet into the job market. But I think having, being an employer and having these different entities has been really rewarding. And I think, honestly, just for myself, being able to follow through with what I started doing, going on this creative endeavor, being able to make a living doing something that I really love doing, and having other people appreciate that in their own way, I think has been really fulfilling.
I love that answer. I actually kind of want to break that down into different parts and with some follow-up questions. So the first part's going to be, I heard a story where you actually got to walk onto the Warriors floor and see gold-blooded all around you. Can you take me through that moment and what it felt like?
Yeah, I mean, it was insane, and that's really the only way I can describe it. They were filming, for this project that we did, and started on the outside of Chase Center, walked in, through security, down the stairs, through these hallways, and kind of out onto the court where it was just all of our shirts were laid out on every seat, because during the postseason they do giveaway tees for all of the home games. So just to kind of, first of all, just to be on the court and just kind of be there during the playoffs was insane. And then physically seeing, something that came from my mind just kind of out there on this stage of the best team in basketball, it's like you really can't quantify that. So it was an amazing feeling, and probably not something that I'll feel much in my life. So I definitely wanted to soak that moment in for sure.
That's awesome. I can only imagine what that would have been like, walking onto the court, seeing all those people wearing your stuff. I even got one of those shirts,
Right
so
on.
so that's something that's magical. Could you ever have dreamed of that?
No, not really. I mean, of course, there's always those, because we do a lot of the sports stuff and stuff. So it's like, oh, well, what if, one of the teams wanted to do a project or something? But this is kind of the biggest possible project that we could have done. This is not just like, hey, a one-off shirt collaboration or something. This is the real deal. So I think I absolutely, the way that kind of went down, I can't imagine it going. I mean, I can't imagine having thought that something like that would have happened prior to that.
That's That's awesome. I have no words to do that. We got to get that footage if we can. Throw it over this.
Well, there is a Warriors kind of a little documentary on that project that is kind of floating around online. So that is up there. But yeah, it was an amazing however many months that was. It was a pretty surreal experience.
You know, all of your hard work coming into fruition. Another thing you said was one of your proudest things is just even making it to this point, right? Seeing what you've done and seeing it through. Can you talk to me about what it took from you to get to this point? What were some of your biggest struggles that you had to overcome?
The struggles, yeah. I mean, lots of struggles along the way. There was, so the biggest one early on was actually like the bootlegging that we had to experience. So a lot of our products get knocked off. You could find them in, Fisherman's Wharf, San Francisco. I mean, just all, on the streets, just all different places, because we do a lot of stuff that's related to local teams and kind of local culture. So it's very, and then even stuff that isn't local, just some of our more popular kind of graphics that reference pop culture and stuff like that. Anything that's really marketable, people are going to kind of take advantage of. So I think as a creative, that was by far the most difficult pill to swallow, because it's like, hey, this is something I came up with and you're ripping me off. Like, it just kind of like angers you real deep down. But I think as I grow and kind of stuff, it's just, this is human nature. People are going to do what they need to do to make money. So, you have to accept some of it. Some of it you obviously have to do things about to, stop that from happening. But it's all kind of a balance. So I think that was a big challenge in kind of getting over creatively. I think in terms of, there was, COVID, we had to kind of shift some of the things that we were doing. We had to shut down our flagship in SF, which is only open for pickups now. That was a little challenging. I think in general, it's been a pretty smooth process even over these years, because we never really set particular expectations, and it's just sort of like, do the best that we can, put out the best product we can. And if people are going to respond. If we don't sell clothes, then we're not doing a good enough job. People don't want to buy our stuff. So
right.
I'm my own worst enemy in terms of like, I need to step up in order to overcome challenges. So thankfully there haven't been that many sort of external disasters or anything that's really held us back. It's really been more, how much do I want to put into it? How much do we want to push, so.
How do you deal with challenges when they arise? What's your mentality when, something goes wrong or not how you expected? How do you go into that to overcome it?
Yeah, I think, it's important to not kind of do that knee-jerk reaction and just go completely off the rails and, do something that you might regret. I think, having done this for a long time, I take a more metered approach to issues that might arise and think, logically, hey, what's the best way to approach this situation? How do we resolve this issue? And, simply just being more comfortable with issues, it sort of takes away a lot of the energy behind it. So I think that kind of working through the problem in a practical manner is the best way to go about it, and not just purely going off of emotion or kind of taking extreme measures that you might think later, hey, I probably shouldn't have done that, and there's no taking that back. So, that's my approach, I think, these days.
No, that's super important, to be able to kind of get hit in the face with something, but be able to take a step back and reassess it and figure out the best plan of action. Because if you just act reactively, most of the times it's not good.
It's true. And it's like it's not will an issue happen, it's when is the issue happening, and there's going to be multiple issues. So with any business, you're already kind of fighting to stay relevant, fighting to turn a profit, figuring out what is it that I'm even doing with this company. So there's always going to be stuff. And it's just, I think it is important to think about how you kind of react to it.
You mentioned before that you had other jobs before you started Adapt, but you started Adapt because you want to kind of do something on your own, be able to stand on your own 2 feet kind of thing.
Yes.
Why? Where did that desire come from?
Yeah, no, great question. I've always worked for, employers in the past. My first job was the Jelly Belly factory. I was a tour guide there. And my last job before Adapt full time was at Apple. So, I've always worked for employers. And when you work for an employer, you your job is to fulfill the wishes and the business prospects of that employer, and which is great, for many people. And it was great for me for a long time. But I think that I just wanted to do my own thing. I had a vision for what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have to sign off with anyone on anything. I didn't want to have to, have meetings and discuss whatever the projects are for this company that I'm, that isn't my own particular vision. So I think that I really just wanted that freedom of being able to see my own dreams through. And the only way to accomplish that is to start your own business if you truly want to have that autonomy.
What do you think is harder, being an employee or having your own business?
That's a great question. I mean, that's such a good question because there's so many components to it. It's harder, I would say, having a small business for sure, because you can kind of turn your brain off and check out and fulfill your jobs at a company, and you're still going to get paid, as long as you're competent. You're not going to get fired, hopefully. So you don't really have to, there's no stress necessarily. It's really just putting in those hours. And,
right.
The trade-off is the hours and the freedom, and you're kind of taking those away. Whereas as a small business owner, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. You don't have to answer to anyone other than, the government with taxes and regulations and things like that. But you can really write your own book, and which is amazing, of course. But then the trade-off there is, well, how are you going to survive, right? You have to sell X amount of product to make your rent every month, or you have to, make sure that you're putting something relevant out there that people are going to want to buy. And there's just all these different business concerns, and you have to get insurance, and you have to do all these different things that an employer is kind of going to do all these things for you, and you're kind of cradled in this little nest and taken care of. But again, you're trading that freedom and that autonomy for kind of comfort and stuff. So easier, certainly, having an employer, but I think more fulfilling doing your own thing.
That was my next question is it worth it?
Yeah, I think if you truly have a vision, and I think that you're really dedicated to what you're doing, I think it's worth it. It is a very different landscape now. Even people that ask me, hey, is it a good time to start a clothing company? What do you think about starting a clothing company? I honestly don't know, because I think it's just so different. It's a lot more difficult to stand out now. But I think, again, if you really have a vision and you have a product that you think is unique and people are going to kind of take towards, then absolutely, because I'm very happy and very fulfilled having the schedule that I have, having the freedoms that I have. So if that's really what you want, and a lot of people, don't want that. They like the simplicity of, kind of that full-time job. So it's really just what it is you personally want. But I think if you're really set on doing that, I think absolutely it's worth taking that chance. And honestly, if you do fail, you'll at least know that you tried, and maybe it's not for you, or maybe you need to do something else, that's kind of in a different industry, or just taking a different approach. So I think that trial and error is important, but I think that you would absolutely regret it if you didn't take the chance, and you're at the end of your career and you're like, hey, I really wish I'd done this back in the day, and it would have changed the whole trajectory of my life. So I think that it's each individual's choice, but I think if you're really into it, go for it.
So for you as an artist and a business owner, how do you toe that line? How do you break up your day? How do you deal with switching gears? Do you have a philosophy or an approach to that?
Yeah, so I'm absolutely 100% designer, creative side. That's how my brain works. I'm not a finance guy. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a kind of logistics guy. I'm really just, everything is kind of creative based. That being said, having a small business and doing largely a lot of it by yourself, you are forced to learn those skills. So business-wise, I'm actually pretty proficient, I would say. I think that it's just a forced kind of skill. So, like I can take care of a lot of the logistics and ordering supplies and kind of dealing with customer service and just doing all these different kind of external components. You're, doing it on your own, you're forced to do. And, if I had partners, for example, a lot of that would probably be taken off of my shoulders. But doing it the way in which I did it, I think it was kind of good in a way because it forced me to gain those skills, and it forced me to see kind of every little component of the brand. How does this function? How does this function? So I know all of the different parts that are involved in making it run. So, but in terms of my own skill sets, I'm absolutely like, if I could have my way, I would just do the creative stuff. But I think as a human being, I've benefited from learning all of the business side of the projects as well.
What do you mean by that as a human being?
I think as a human being, in terms of just having life skills, like living in society, understanding, taxes and accounting, and just, working with suppliers, and just all of these different things that I think you can apply in other areas of life as well. They're just sort of important things. I think if all I ever did was sit on Illustrator and Photoshop, and that was the only thing I had to do with the company, I just wouldn't really have that 360 of what's going on. And then I wouldn't have those other skills to apply to other areas of my life.
Got you. So it sounds like your approach was, I had to do it, so I did it and learned it.
That's right. Yeah, it was because had I taken on, one or two partners, I knew that I could take all that off of my shoulders. But I also knew that, when time came to create new products, there's these one or two other voices that I may not particularly agree with. And because I am so particular when it comes to designing, I had an inkling that I'd probably be butting heads and there would be issues. And, I had thought it at times to work with friends, on the company. And I'd always heard, you never want to mix, friends and business. Yeah. And I've seen that, take bad turns as well. So I think it was a direction I took, it was a more difficult direction, I think, but it allowed me to fulfill the things that I wanted to fulfill creatively.
So, learning all of this, the business skills, you've already had the artistic skills and you kind of melded it together. You've created a life for yourself where you're sustained off of it. Over these 2 decades, what have you learned about yourself through the process?
I think that for me, it's interesting because it's been essentially there my entire adulthood. It is me and I am it. And it's kind of like, it's just very integrated into the person that I am. So much of my life and growing and getting older has been in tandem with the brand. And so I think it's hard to completely separate either one. So I think that parts of my personality are probably from being in the clothing industry, and parts of my, creative sensibilities are from doing clothing as opposed to being a painter or being a photographer, for example. So in terms of who I am, it's just very integrated into who I am. Most of my friends, they know that I'm so tied into Adapt and stuff. So it's just kind of part of the package of knowing me is like, okay, well, he's like the Adapt guy or whatever. So that's just what it is. And I've never really thought too much about like, how am I separate of that? Cause it's just what I've always been doing. Even when I was full-time at Apple or CNET or wherever, it was like, my mind was always still on Adapt. So I think that it's a super huge part of who I am. Yeah.
Okay. So through your journey, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
I think, perseverance is a big one, keeping positive, through the ebbs and flows of everything, being able to bounce back, when I was talking about the knockoffs and stuff like that, it's having that resilience, having tough skin. I think, a huge one would be, the working with other entities, kind of, collaborating with different people, putting yourself out there, being open to criticism. I think that the nature of creating clothing as a creative in any really creative space is, you're putting out a product. You have no idea if people are going to like it, if they're going to reject it, if they're going to think it's stupid. And your literal livelihood depends on that. So it's kind of stressful. You're constantly being put on the chopping block. It's like, hey, what are you going to do next? How are you going to keep relevant? How are you creating a product that's going to be interesting to people? So I think just being strong-willed, strong-minded, all those kind of traits of having resilience and being confident in what you're doing, I think those are all lessons that I learned through growing the brand.
Some of that stuff is really hard to learn too. As you're experiencing it, do you ever take time to reflect on your journey?
I think possibly not as it's happening, but in looking back on a certain situation, you can kind of absorb it. Hey, what did I learn from this? What was kind of the message that I can take from this? How can I sort of improve the person that I am or the product that I'm putting out, through this experience? So I think that, maybe not in the moment, but I think over time, as I look back on all the different kind of eras of Adapt, it's like, what was the message here? What was the message here? And they all kind of have a purpose. So
do you see any parallels between creating art and creating your business in terms of, I guess, process or traits needed to be successful in both areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think creating the art is being creative, having good ideas that I think, people are going to connect with, and then being confident enough to put those out in the right medium. So I think, there's that creative aspect to the art. That's the most important part to me. And then now I'm trying to think, does a creative component to the business side of things factor in? And I think it does, making creative approaches to, being good with the spending habits of the brand, and, how can I be efficient with the funds that I have, making the right products, treating our customers in the right way, that they're going to respect what we do and be loyal to the brand. So I think it does take creative approaches to the business to have a successful business, because you just have to, or else you're not going to make it. So I think being creative, constantly adapting to the situation, figuring out what it is that we need to do to be relevant and to do the best thing for our customers so that they're going to want to stick with us. And we have customers that we've had for 15 years, which is amazing, so those are really the people that we do all this for. So I think it is important to be creative, I think, in both arenas.
Right, because you gotta be in business. You gotta have creative problem-solving skills in order to maintain being successful, and adapt, because you either adapt or die. So
that's right.
I like the parallels between the creative portion of creating art, but also being creative and finding solutions. I think that's really important. I think that's something people don't necessarily think of when it comes to business, right?
Yeah, and in the landscape that there is now, in particular, because sort of phones and computers and basically social media are just, and that marketing component is such a big part to every brand now. You essentially cannot survive without that component, because nobody's going to know who you are. They're not going to be able to find you. So, and that's constantly changing, right? Like the algorithm is constantly changing. How do you get your stuff in front of eyeballs? And even the companies, they themselves are changing the algorithms, and then the businesses have to adapt to those changes. So you have to be fluid, and you have to be able to throw away an old idea and pick up a new idea, because that's what's happening. And, and I myself don't always do that. And I'm not the best at doing a lot of those things. And I'm okay with that, because A, I've just been doing it for a long time, and I'm just, I've kind of set my ways, and B, I think we've just built our own kind of thing in a unique way that I'm able to kind of maybe avoid some of it. But I think any current brand that's really trying to be very relevant, you have to constantly adjust and change to meet the needs of the landscape.
Where do you draw the line between staying true to your vision and brand and knowing when to adapt or evolve?
Yeah, so that question, I think, is tied into, as a designer, I'll put out certain graphics that I think are cool, or, based on some type of thing that's going on in current events. And then there's the question of, okay, well, are you just putting out this product because you're going to sell and make money? Or are you putting out this product because you actually believe in what you're doing? And the closest analogy I can find in talking with some of my photographer friends is, if you're a creative photographer, for example, you may not love doing weddings, but wedding photography pays really well. It's consistent. And it's just a great source of income that can allow you to push maybe some other sort of projects that you'd like to do. So in that way, it kind of parallels with what I do, because there are times when it's like, hey, I need to pay the bills. Maybe I should do this graphic that I'm not necessarily super excited about, but I know people want us to do this. So there's always that balance of being true to exactly what you want to do and then being realistic. And I don't put out every single graphic that I want to design because, frankly, not a lot of people are going to want to buy it. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't make any sense for me to do it as a brand. So I can do it on my own time. I can do it just creatively, but it's not necessarily great as a t-shirt or as a hoodie. So I think it's keeping that balance, but I absolutely always try to be on the side of doing what I truly think is a great product that I believe in, that I think, comes from my own personal interest and stuff like that. And I think that's generally what we do. There's some things that I like more than others, of course, but I think it's very important to be true to yourself, or else kind of, what are you doing? You're just making something for someone else then. So.
Well, I really like that. It is a balance of both, because you might do things that you don't want to do, but it's going to make you money. But if you know that and there's a plan, it'll allow you to do things that you are able to do with yourself. And it's really up to the individual to be able to decide that, but they got to have a vision and plan first, versus just kind of floating around and, trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I think in all business and in most walks of life is that compromise. It's, if you have a job, hey, this is I'm like some person on Wall Street or something. It's like, hey, I work 90 hours a week, but I'm making a ton of money. So it's like you have the X and the Y axis of like money versus fulfillment. And it's like, okay, well, where do you land on that spectrum? And you try to have both as much as you can, but you have to compromise from a practical standpoint in certain places along the road, just because you have to. You really have no choice, So, but I think striving to be as fulfilling as you can is a good goal.
It is, and you're right. That kind of knocked me off my seat. Life is compromise. It can be solved. It can be explained as that. But knowing what you're aiming for and trying to find a life that's fulfilling, that's always the dream and that's always the goal. And I feel like that's where you're at right now.
I'm constantly trying to get there. If I'm not there, I'm trying to get there. So yeah, that is the goal, being fulfilled, being able to take care of yourself and kind of survive. And, that's really what you want to do, I think, in a career. Yeah.
Any advice out there for young creatives looking to build a business, build a brand, make a name for themselves?
Yeah, I think, that touches on some of the stuff that we talked about a little earlier. I think if you are going to start a brand, you want to have a vision, have an idea of what you want to do, have a strong name, have a message behind the name. What is it that you stand for? What is the purpose of what you're doing? So I think that's really important. I think having a good team, and I have a great team now, but when I started, I didn't. And I think that did hamper some of my efforts early on. I think picking the right people around you to work with is really important, because they're going to shoulder a lot of that load for you too. So I think doing that, and if you do go it alone, like I did, just be kind of comfortable in the decisions that you're making. But I think having that strong base is really important. I think those are the main ones. And I think being listening to your audience, being aware of where you sit in the marketplace, what are you providing? There's so much stuff out there. There's so much, we have an infinite amount of choices for anything that we want, goods and services or anything else. So it's, how are you kind of contributing to the global whatever,
Right. You must do a lot in your day.
Yeah, it's a pretty busy day, but thankfully it's not all work. I try to relax all the time too. So I think having balance is super important. The first, I would say 6 or 7 years, I really just did adapt 24/7. I didn't even have a TV. I was just working all the time. I would do my full-time job, then I'd go home and work and stuff. So, I think was way too extreme. I think, having balance is super important.
So how do you do that in your daily routine? How do you keep yourself from being burned out?
I think just doing it for so long now, I'm able to properly, allocate my time, whether it be business versus pleasure versus, taking time for myself or hanging out with friends or, researching stuff for Adapt. So I think I just naturally keep a pretty good balance now. But like I said, in the beginning, it was very unbalanced. But I think just with time and with experience, you learn to kind of separate the business and the pleasure in your life.
Would you say it's time management? Do you meditate, exercise, anything like that?
Exercise for sure. I should meditate a lot more. I do enjoy it, but I don't do enough of it. But I definitely get exercise, and I think a lot in general. So I think that thinking is important because you can kind of put your thoughts together and figure out, what you want to do with your day, what you want to do with your month, and kind of schedule it that way. But in terms of in terms of thinking ahead, I've never had a business plan with the brand. It's really just been going at it day to day, week to week, month to month, and that's worked for me. I don't know that that's the best for everyone, but that's how I approached it. And I think constantly thinking and updating your thoughts and making new decisions based on what's going on is important in keeping balance in your life and stuff like that. So
yeah, that sounds super reflective. That sounds like it's also a form of meditating a little bit, being able to think about what you're going to do, how you're going to spend your time, and how you're going to maintain that balance.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is its own form of meditation, I guess. I guess for me, but in the traditional sense of meditation, I don't do enough. But, I recently went to Joshua Tree, which was a great kind of place to get out into nature and stuff. So I'm absolutely, the roadmap is to do more kind of meditative activities and stuff, whether it be taking a trip or just even in my own, current living situations. So it's definitely important to reflect, I would say.
That's awesome. I really think so, because you can get so caught up in the day to day that you lose sight of where you're going and how to get there. Sometimes you get swept up by the wave that is life and business and art. So it's good to just reflect and think about where you're going sometimes.
Yeah. And in business, it's so easy you just want to fill up your whole day because it's like, hey, I should be pushing. I'm not doing enough. I need to be putting out more designs, or I need to be thinking more about these projects. And it's just an infinite amount of time you could spend doing that. So I think you really do have to stop, carve out the time, think about what you're doing, be reflective, be mindful. And I think that'll just create a more balanced life.
No, I guess my real question is, how much does where you've come from, are you from the Bay Area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much does, where you come from impact your brand?
Oh, that's massive. Our brand is so Bay Area, like we're kind of known as a Bay Area brand. Like, people who don't live around here, they would maybe purchase our stuff for different reasons. We do a lot of stuff that isn't related to the Bay, but I think just kind of naturally we became known as this Bay Area brand because we worked with a lot of Bay Area artists, musicians, and then of course all of the sports stuff that we do. So by its nature, we're very Bay Area based, and like a lot of the sensibilities for I'll do something with like a Marine World graphic, which was like this now defunct, theme park that was in Vallejo. So there's just there's a lot of local references, but so yeah, I would say that the vast majority of the graphics that we produce are in some way tied to Bay Area culture. Yeah.
Is that something you're proud of, to be from the Bay?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing that the Bay is so culture rich that I can essentially base an entire brand, and we've literally put out hundreds and hundreds of designs over the years. I think well into the 500s of designs. So the fact that we can pull so much culture from one relatively small radius is an amazing testament to where we live, and it's just an incredible place. So if I lived in some place in the Midwest that that people have never heard of, it's like, what culturally are you pulling from? So you're much more limited to the inspiration. And so I think Bay Area culture in conjunction with the kind of entertainment that I grew up with, the literature that I grew up with, the media that I grew up with as a kid, I think it's those two big things combined that has created most of the sort of that's been the manifestation for most of the product that we've put out over the years.
That's awesome. Drawing inspiration from everything from you've absorbed as a child to, everything we've experienced as adults growing up in the Bay Area. Like you said, it's culture rich, and we're lucky to be from here. So, I think that's all I got. Evan, is there anything else you want to add?
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. It's always great to reflect on the brand over the years and different, components to what brought us to where we are. So I really appreciate the chat.
No, thank you. It was an honor talking to you, Evan,
Likewise.
The founder of Adapt, and we out.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to Meet the Creators. I hope you found value in today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and please share with a friend.